Hi, my name's Bree, and this is my submission for the critical race narrative. In reading the racial identity development theory, I recognize that this theory helps you examine and understand your own racial identity because it helps you understand your own openness to race and where a person may be either racist or more open to exploring racial differences. Racial identity development theory provides you with the ability to recognize where you are in your racial identity and helps address how open a person may be to other racial identities by being aware of their own identity. What informed my racial identity development was being consciously aware of what stage I was in and how that stage impacts my ability to be open to other races. Learning more about race has helped inform my racial identity. Learning more about the differences between my experiences as a white person and the experiences of a person of color helped me develop my racial identity. The role of race in framing my racial identity is that my specific race plays an important aspect in which racial identity I am. Because I am white, my racial identity is framed differently in that it takes in the fact that I can be anti-racist, but I have to consciously make the choice to move through each framework and stage to be anti-racist. I first became aware of my racial self when I was about 8 or 9. I remember being in Hawaii and playing with a couple other kids my age when one of the other kids who was white said her mom had to meet us to make sure we weren't black. I remember becoming increasingly aware of my own identity as being white and wondering why her mom would want to ensure that. In this moment, I remember being more aware of my whiteness and not understanding why it would matter what the color of my skin was in order for us to spend time together. This helped shape my racial self at a young age. I have never personally experienced or witnessed institutionalized racism. However, I understand institutionalized racism as racism that is ingrained in policies and procedures in institutions such as government, businesses, schools, and organizations. Institutionalized racism can look like policies and procedures that prohibits a person of color from being treated fairly in an institution. I believe I have never experienced institutionalized racism because I am of white descent. I have more privilege in being white, so I do not have firsthand experience with racism toward myself. I know this is definitely a type of privilege that has kept me safe from institutionalized racism. I know that being white comes with white privilege, and with that comes the fact that I will never have the same experiences that someone who is a person of color may have. Institutionalized racism directly impacts persons of color more than that of someone who is white. It's important that I'm aware of this privilege so that I may perpetuate an openness to others so I can further move towards being anti-racist towards people of color. Institutionalized racism can affect any person's development. I think if I was an adolescent and experienced institutionalized racism, I would feel confused and hurt. For example, if I were to experience racism in my school, I would feel unwelcome in that environment and may make it more difficult for me to do better in my academics. If I were in early and middle adulthood, I think I would feel angry that I still experience institutionalized racism because after so many years, you would think that there would be ways that racism would be stopped. If I were to experience racism in my organization or place of work, I would feel unwelcomed and feel as though the work that I do is not good enough. I may not feel adequate in my job and place of work. In late adulthood, I would feel sad and maybe even despair as this has been happening all throughout my life. For example, a person in late adulthood may lose hope that policies and procedures in an institution would ever benefit them. Each stage of development is impacted by institutionalized racism because these racist policies and procedures can prohibit a person from having the same fairness that a person who is not of color may have. Applying critical race theory, one action I can take to challenge power structures is by continually taking CEUs and continuing my education on racism and power. In the article, Critical Race Theory, Opportunities for Application in Social Work, Practice, and Policy, the authors state that social workers can incorporate information and research on the effect of discrimination on mental health as part of psychoeducation, demonstrating awareness of and acknowledging the impact that racism has on mental health. By participating in CEUs and continuing my education on racism and power, I can ensure that I am addressing the role of racism in the child welfare system and in private practice as a clinician. Specifically, the article also discusses being aware of colorblindness and tailoring each approach with individual families to that family, which is another step I can take in ensuring I am applying critical race theory. The article discusses that by being open about differences in race between clinician and client, the clinician is opening the door to reduce colorblindness. This is another way that I can apply critical race theory to challenge power structures. Thank you.